In this video, we're going to be showcasing 5 different canopy ideas from the MakerPipe community, and these are all really great, and they share a common thing, which is they're built with off-the-shelf steel electrical conduit and MakerPipe clamps, which if you don't know, we manufacture those in upstate South Carolina here in our shop. And these are all custom canopies that were put together by customers and then shared with us, and these are really cool. And we'll start with this first one here from Lance, and I love this one because this doubles as a privacy screen for their deck and patio area, and then folds out into a canopy. And as we can see here, this is kind of the main rectangular frame that acts as the privacy screen here. And this is a really simple frame, just a 2-dimensional square, maybe even a rectangle, just depending on the dimensions. But essentially, it's just they use T connectors here in the corners and in the middle there, along with the MakerPipe 180-degree connector to achieve this simple rectangular frame. And then they bolted this to the ceiling using the MakerPipe adjustable angle flange. And that adjustable angle flange is what makes this able to rotate, as we can see here in these later pictures. But first, we can see here's the sunshade attached to the frame, and I think they just did that using some normal, just regular old zip ties there, just holding that in place. We actually have a video on the channel on how to attach canopies and different things based on if you have grommets or not, and I'll link that down below if you want to check it out. But zip ties are a great option. And then here we can see the canopy is folded out into kind of sunshade mode, and it just folds out because of those adjustable angle flanges. So those are bolted to this upper beam here on the patio, as we can see. And there's just 3 of those, and those verticals are attached to that frame. And if you leave those pieces, the bottom base pieces loose, you can hinge the end clamp in between those 2 pieces, which is exactly how they're achieving this hinge here. And they're able to go from this privacy mode here, where it adds this shade to people sitting behind the privacy screen, and then it folds out into this awesome canopy. And just a really cool idea. And later this week, I'm going to do more of a breakdown and talk more of how they did it, and talk about the connectors more and kind of highlight some specific things. But just a really awesome idea, and just a great inspiration if you're making a sunshade. So thanks so much, Lance, for sharing that. We really appreciate it. Next up is a canopy from John, and this is a really cool one. I like this one a lot. This one is attached to the house in a really unique way, as we can see here. And it's very similar to the last frame, where it's just one large rectangular 2-dimensional rectangle with T connectors in the corners to create those elbows and create that 2-dimensional rectangle. And then it's just long horizontal spans and long vertical spans that are all secured in place using, it looks like, just all T connectors. And then you use T connectors to grab onto the horizontal bar and send this angled piece of conduit down to the deck to be held in place. But here we can see how it's held on the house, which is really cool. Essentially, they just kind of bolted or screwed some of the eye hooks into the side of their house here. And then that is what the 3/4 inch EMT conduit is sitting inside of, which is a really good idea. You could hinge this if you needed to, or you could easily unhook it and take it off if you have a storm coming and you want to take this shade down. So that's really cool. And we can see here it's just a combination of different connectors. There's the EMT coupling that we make, as well as the T connector directly next to that, which is cool. And essentially, they are just using that coupling to extend the long horizontal span, because you can only get EMT conduit in spans of 5 or 10 foot from your local hardware store. So they're extending that span and then bracing it with the T connector, which is a good idea. And then we can see here's a close-up of how it's attached. Very similar to that last build we looked at from Lance. This by John, he used the adjustable angle flange as well, where it's grabbing onto that angled vertical that we saw and then bolted to the deck railing here using the same adjustable angle flange, except this one is probably not rotating. This one is probably squeezed tight and secured in place just to give this a strong connection to the deck rail, because I don't think he needs to hinge it. So that's really cool. There's a close-up of the adjustable angle flange in action there, which is awesome. Here's a couple more shots of the frame. We can see that the grommets and the sunshade are held in place with zip ties through those grommets, and that's really awesome. And then here's another angle of the eye hook that the conduit is resting inside of. So really cool idea, and really great techniques incorporated in this one. Love seeing it, John. Thanks so much for sharing. Next up is a shed deck shade that comes from Ray. That's a mouthful. Shed deck shade. Say that 5 times fast. But this is really cool. And essentially, as we can see here, Ray has got a shed here that he has built this custom canopy and shade for. And essentially, it's very similar to what we've been looking at, where it's a large rectangular frame, except this one is a bit different, and a good technique if you're making just a big box, which essentially is what this is, where essentially it's got those horizontal spans up top, and those are attached to the same connector that at the vertical pole that's going all the way down to the ground. And he accomplished that with the MakerPipe 90-degree connector, which works perfect for creating those corner connections like this, and just use one on each side to create that three-way corner connection. And then he's using a MakerPipe adjustable angle flanges, either those or the MakerPipe 45-degree connectors. Either of those connectors work great for adding angled braces. And then we can see here in the middle, he did the same thing, just added 2 braces. And then on the corners, he's got 145, or I would imagine that's an adjustable angle to create a unique angled brace that doesn't look like 45 degrees to me. But really cool, nice and simple. And then those vertical posts just go to the ground there. And I think we can see he's got them resting on maybe some concrete pavers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it looks like it's going down to the ground. It looks like he also has a flange on the bottom there just to give this a nice little footprint that he can set on these concrete pavers. And then it looks like we can see the sunshade is attached, I think, with zip ties, it looks like to me, which is nice and simple, really easy method for doing that. And then here we can see he kind of attached this to the side of the shed in a unique way, where he added some blocks to the wall, and the EMT conduit frame sits up against those blocks. And then he's using electrical 2-hole straps to secure the conduit frame to those blocks, and those just, if you haven't seen, you get those really inexpensively off the shelf, and then they have holes pre-drilled in them that you can add screws through to secure EMT conduit to different flat surfaces, and that's what he's using here to attach this framework to hit the side of his shed. So that's really cool, and just some great techniques in this one as well. Really awesome, Ray. Thanks so much for sharing this. Really appreciate it. Next up is an awesome one from Tom. This is another canopy, but this one is kind of unique in the fact that it has more of an arch to it. We've been seeing a lot of box and cubular, rectangular frames, but this one has an arch built into it, which is really awesome, as we can see here, and it just looks really great and allowed them to save a lot of money, they said, on this build. But essentially, it just has these long arches that start, and are attached to the house. I think they also use the adjustable angle flange, if I'm not mistaken. I can't really see in these pictures. Yeah, there we go. They did use the adjustable angle flange just attached to some wood coming off of the peak of the roof here, or the eave of the roof, and then they've got the adjustable angle flange that's sitting this pipe down at an angle, and then this is arched and going down to the deck and is attached to the deck there. And then we can see just they have that 90-degree bend in the corners, which looks really nice and keeps the sunshade from getting ripped, and just gives it, like I said, a really good look. I like it when there's arches and things incorporated into builds. Not everything has to be rectangular, so it's always nice to see those nice bends. Really cool, nice and simple construction. Really just MakerPipe T connectors on the sides, and I think the 180-degree connector in the middle, which allows that vertical piece to run continuously through it into that arch and then to the wall where it's attached, and then of course just that bracing from one side to the other secured to these 3 pieces of conduit. Then they have the sunshade attached using these black plastic clamps that essentially work really well for attaching greenhouse plastic and sunshades and things to your conduit frames. And that's nice and simple and inexpensive, and you can always pop those off if you want to take the shade off. Like I said, if you've got storm coming through, always got to be conscious of that when you're making these shades. So this is really cool. A lot of cool techniques in this, and like I said, always cool to see some arches and some things besides rectangles and harsh angles in it. So really cool, Tom. Thanks so much for sharing this. We really appreciate it. Last but not least is an awesome sail shade from Steve, and I love this one a lot. Has a really cool shape and just fits the whole house, I think, really well and just looks fantastic. This whole thing was made entirely with 1-inch MakerPipe T connectors, except for their 2 adjustable angle connectors in here that we'll look at. But essentially, just a MakerPipe T connector used really creatively to create unique angles and attach to different areas, and just really awesome. I really love the techniques that he incorporated into this. Using the MakerPipe T connector, he used it in a lot of ways that people don't realize that you can. One of which, is kind of at the top of a vertical like this, and because it's at this, you can orient that in any direction that you'd like to achieve different angles like this. And that's how he made this triangular frame with all these unique angles and measurements, and just looks fantastic. And then looks like he drilled through the conduit and added a eye hook, it looks like, in the end of the conduit to attach the cable or the paracord that he's using to pull the sunshade tight. And that's really cool. And he's got this angled down to the banister here and then angled up, and just lots of cool things about this one. It looks fantastic. And it's just really awesome that he was able to do this all pretty much with T connectors, with the exception of a couple of adjustable angle connectors that we can see here that he used to attach to the horizontal pole and create this unique angle for that brace that attaches there and then goes down to the sidewall there. So he's got 4 adjustable angle connectors in total to create that brace, and just looks awesome and has this nice triangular shape and just has a lot of cool angles and is really awesome. So thanks so much for sharing this, Steve, and thanks for everybody for posting your builds. There's a ton more like this in the community if you want to check it out. We've also done a couple of other canopy roundups in the past that I'll link down below. And again, thanks everybody for posting your builds, and we always love seeing them, so keep them coming. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.